Good morning and happy Tuesday for another great Tuesday 10 at 10. I am Richard Charpentier, your host, and I'm replacing Dr. Lynn Carson for this great Tuesday, and where we'll take questions from you, the bakers, to answer your day-to-day questions and issues. So without further ado, let's get started. First question. Uh, is there any equipment or means of stretching or strengthening the gluten like artisan bakers do? Well, that's a big question, because we're talking about how do we create gluten development. There are many methods of different styles of mixers, from the dough break to the fork to the spiral to the horizontal mixer. All of them do the same thing. It's basically mechanically develop the gluten. So as you're fully hydrating your dough, a simple artisan dough, which is going to be salt, yeast, flour, water, and then you're stretching it and you're hydrating it until you create a window pane, or the gluten is stretching, and you can see, through the gluten. We've all seen those pictures. Or, as I mentioned, mechanically. Or some artisans will do is, I've seen that's why it's you have to develop your method and your technique where you're getting the results that matter to you. The thing that artisan bakers will do, they would undermix purposely, over hydrate, get the high hydration 72%, and give time. And time will help develop the gluten process, long fermentation. And because you can develop a strength of your gluten through, as I mentioned, mechanically, meaning using mechanical equipment, mixers, or enzyme through the enzyme. I cannot say it, but through the enzyme. And enzymes will work it to help strengthen your dough. That's why it's magical. Like you've seen online, people taking dough and barely mixing it and putting it together with slow low yeast, and it rises up. And the next day you sort of have a pool gluten. You're like, how did that happen? Enzyme are there to help you because they're naturally present. So to answer your question, there's, hopefully that it answer your question, but either mechanically or through enzyme with long fermentation, and long fermentation helps develop better flavors. But there are lots of different mixers, so hopefully it helped. Next question. Natural preservation. I bake wedding cakes and I use alcohol derivative like brandy. What else can I use as a way to preserve instead of alcohol in order to achieve shelf life of a year and above? Wow, a year shelf life for wedding cakes. Well, I get the question, but why, my first thing reading what you wrote is, why do you need a shelf life of more than a year for a wedding cake? What's the purpose? I haven't seen any wedding cakes, shelf stable, or it would be a pre-planned wedding. But I would say, if you take away the wedding cake portion and you're making alcohol cakes, alcohol is a great preservation system. Because then it'll kill everything, as you know, in your cake, and it gives a flavor. But unfortunately, if you have alcohol, and you have some certain regulations and laws where you can go above 10% if you're trying to commercialize and sell it to other people. So therefore, it could be issues with children or people who do not want to drink alcohol. So if you want to do that, and use other ingredients as a mean to preserve your cakes, you're talking, like I said, the sorbic acid, the potassium sorbate, type of anti-mold preservation system you could add in. But the first thing in knowing, as you're trying to preserve to go to a year or more, it's got to be great packaging, great ingredients, clean bakery, and understanding where your pH and your water activity of your cakes are, before I could recommend anything and tell you, hey, this is based on where you are and based on the packaging and based on the shelf life, this is what you need. But right now, a lot of people would be thrilled to get a 1 year shelf life. So I wouldn't change anything unless you think it's a necessity to remove the alcohol. And if you want more in-depth review of what you're doing, please contact me on the with a bakery consultant, and we can work something out. Next question. I want to make a commercial wonton skins. Ingredients are flour, water, and salt and food coloring. Do I need to put a preservative if it is to be salt frozen? I know what you're talking about. I've seen the frozen wonton sheets or refrigerated. If it's salt frozen, no, do not add anything, because I'm assuming here it's not, telling me, but it's a dough. People will thaw it almost like a puff pastry, and then put stuff inside, and then fry it or bake it or steam it or whatever they do with it. So as long as you have another baking or cooking process after using it frozen, so there's a kill point, and therefore your sorbic acid or anything you would put into it will be extra and not needed. So to answer, very quick answer, no, you would not need if it's frozen, unless the people will take it and then they have to have a shelf life after they put their kill step in their homes, where people would do it 3-4 days, and that you might need, but you don't know what fillings they're going to put. If it's only the wonton skin, do not add anything. It's not necessary for a frozen product. How to prevent retrogradation in bread? Retrogradation basically means affecting the starch component, the amylose and the amylopectin. And there's a lot of great information on the Bakerpedia educational, where they go in depth into it. And therefore, as mean to prevent retrogradation, it's about understanding how retrogradation happens, modifying the starch components, because it does affect the amylose and amylopectin. But amylose, if you read in textbooks, and people will use potato starch, one, to prevent the starch retrogradation. Then temperature is super important, because at temperature between 45 and 55 degrees, you accelerate retrogradation so rapidly, because that's why the notion and the belief that, hey, put my bread in a refrigerator to keep it might help a little bit, but your bread will get drier quickly or start retrogradation quickly. The usual culprit, picking the right enzymes to prevent that, or if not, emulsifiers like monoglyceride, as heavily used in bakeries to soften the crumb and help prevent retrogradation. Those are all the basic things you can do. But again, as I tell everybody, if you would like a little more in depth, feel free to reach out, and I can help as a consultant, and we could develop something with you. All right, thank you. So last question: can sorbic acid be used in fruitcakes? Good question. And if you say, again, I'm going to look at the breakdown and say, what's a fruitcake? A typical fruitcake, there's no true definition, but typical fruitcake is when you have 1 part batter and 1 part fruit. So meaning if you put 100 grams of batter, you're going to put 100 grams of fruit, 200. So it's half and half. So it's going to be loaded with fruit. If you look at the old techniques, you do not need sorbic acid unless you're seeing issues. One, sorbic is not easily soluble in water, so I'm not a big fan alone of sorbic acid. It can help, but not in that instant. But if you're using a lot of different fruits, I'm assuming as in the fruitcake you do have some lemon juice or citrusy, go natural. Use lemon juice. A touch of lemon juice will bring your pH down. You should be in a good spot to as a way of preventing. And if you look at the old school too, where you would macerate your fruits for overnight for 12 hours in apple cider, and that with the apple cider, which is slightly acidic, it would be a great way where you don't need anything, because you're getting some natural citric and you're getting probably some natural acids presence within the fruits. So if you do see quick molds, within a few days with your fruitcakes, again, go back to sanitation, packaging, how you're handling it. And always, with that data, water activity is a great tool, and pH and TTA are always good to just know where are you. It's easier to make better recommendation. All right, so this was the last question, so that'll be a wrap. Again, Richard Charpentier, thank you very much for listening to another great Tuesday 10 at 10, and we'll see you next Tuesday, and keep on baking. Take care.